Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. How's everyone doing? Inshallah, it was a good day of fasting. The month is flying by, mashallah. Every single day you wake up and it's like, I can't believe the month is flying by like this. But subhanallah, it's been a blessed month, inshallah, and inshallah it continues to be a blessed month for everybody. To begin, like we always begin, I'll be beginning with a couple of masail. Well, today one in particular. And then inshallah from there, we will be entering into the speech. The mas'ala that I wanted to talk about today was a mas'ala that I mentioned about 2 nights ago, which is the mas'ala of Khums. What is Khums? How is it supposed to be split up? How is it supposed to be given? Who is it supposed to be given to? What are the portions? So Khums in Arabic literally translates to 1/5. Now 1/5 of what? 1/5 of any surplus wealth that you gathered over the year, right? That you are not using for your family, that you are not using for your necessities. So let's say me, as a father, inshallah, one day, I gather $100,000, right? But my family only needs $80,000. I have $20,000 left over. That is a surplus. That is used for vacations, that's used for fun, that's used for whatever, but it's not necessary for my family. From that 20,000, I split 1/5. 1/5 of 20,000 is 4,000, exactly. That 4,000 is then split in half. Half of it is given to protecting and building Islam, right? It's given to Islamic charities. It's given to your local masjid, your local Islamic school, your local Islamic orphanage, so on and so forth. Things that propagate the religion of Islam and continue to help the religion of Islam. The other half is given to poor sayyids. Now, why poor sayyids? Some people argue, they're like, well, that's unfair. Why only poor sayyids? Why only poor descendants of the Prophet? That's because they cannot get any other type of charity. The only type of charity allowed to be given to them is from this khums, right? So you have half that goes to propagating and supporting the religion of Islam, and you have half that goes to poor sayyids, right? And there are many, many, many reasonings for this khums. One is that the Quran brings us specific ayahs that break down where we're supposed to give this khums. Another is that the Prophet ﷺ, whenever the Muslims would win treasure in war, he would take 1/5 of that to support the religion of Islam. The rest was split across the Muslims, but 1/5 of that was taken to support the religion of Islam. So that's our khums. It's very simple. It's 1/5 of any excess wealth that you may have. And this money can be given directly to your local masjid. If you know you have a masjid that's in need of the money, you can give it directly to them. If you know that there is an Islamic school that is in need of funds, you can give it directly to them. If there's an orphanage around you that supports Muslims that is in need of funds, you can directly go and give those funds to them. And may Allah reward us for any funds that we give in the name of Islam and in the name of supporting the religion of Islam. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وأهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين سيما سيدنا ومولانا الإمام الخلف الهادي المهدي عجل الله تعالى فرجه وسهل مخرجه وجعلنا من أنصاره وأعوانه. My dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في محكم كتابه الكريم أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ويمكرون ويمكر الله والله خير الماكرين. They plan and God plans, and verily Allah is the best of planners. And inshallah we'll touch back to this ayah at the end of the speech, but keep it in mind for now. Tonight, insha'Allah, we will be talking about Abu Talib alayhi salam, as it is coinciding with the dates that he died. Abu Talib alayhi salam, the guardian of Islam, and more specifically, his faith in our final messenger, Mohammed Sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. As I said, tonight we delve into the life of a man whose contributions to Islam were among some of the foremost reasons that we proudly call ourselves Muslims today. This was a man who stood as a fortress to protect Rasulullah from Quraysh. This was a man who had an unwavering love and an unwavering respect for both Islam and for its final messenger. This was a man that dedicated his entire life until he lost his life eventually to the servitude of Islam. And this is a man that is none other than Abu Talib ibn Abdul Muttalib, the foremost protector of Islam. Abu Talib, just to give you a brief background of who he was a noble leader of Quraysh. He was one of the foremost leaders of Quraysh. And he was the head of the Banu Hashim clan after his father Abdul Muttalib. Along with that, he was the uncle of the Prophet, but also a father to the Prophet. Why? Because when the Prophet was very young, as we know, he lost both of his parents. And so he went into the care of his grandfather Abdul Muttalib. After losing Abdul Muttalib, he went into the care of his uncle Abu Talib. And Abu Talib always made sure to never treat the Prophet like an orphan. He made sure to treat him more than just his nephew, but as one of his own sons, as one of his favorite sons. Abu Talib was a man of immense honor, wisdom, and faith. He was widely respected in Meccan society, and he held a lot of weight in Meccan society. His words held weight, his decisions held weight. Quraysh respected him, and the Muslims respected him. And he held great influence and was one of the reasons that Quraysh never dared to come near the Prophet, never dared to try to kill the Prophet during the lifetime of Abu Talib, because they were afraid of Abu Talib. Yet, my brothers and sisters, there is a deep injustice that is done against this man. Some schools of thought and some historians try to say that Abu Talib, with all of his contributions to Islam, did not die a Muslim. Some schools of thought try to say he died a disbeliever, a kafir. Inshallah, tonight we'll be proving why this idea is ridiculous. The idea that a man like Abu Talib died a kafir is absolutely ridiculous. And why there is no doubt, and there should be no doubt in anyone's mind, that Abu Talib died not only as a Muslim, but as one of the best Muslims. To begin, Abu Talib's role in protecting the prophets. What did Abu Talib alayhi salam do to protect the prophets? From the very beginning of the Prophet's life, as I said, Abu Talib played an extremely instrumental role of protecting the prophets. As I said, when the Prophet was just a child, he lost both his parents. And then he lost his guardian, Abdul Muttalib. And so he was taken into the care of his uncle. As the Prophet grew, so did Abu Talib's dedication to him. So did Abu Talib's love to him. When the Prophet Mohammed declared his prophethood and invited the people of Mecca to Islam, one of the first things he did was invite his own family to Islam. And the majority of his family ridiculed him. They laughed at him. They said, "What do you mean? You're an orphan. You're a nobody. How could you be the prophet of God? If there was going to be a prophet of God, it would have been one of us, the rich leaders of Quraysh. We have money, we have influence. God would have chosen us. He's going to choose you, the poor orphan? No way." There was only a few people who believed in the prophets. From them was Khadija alayhi salam, his wife. From them was Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib at the ripe age of 9 years old. And from them was Abu Talib ibn Abdul Muttalib, the uncle of the Prophet, even though he had to hide his faith. to keep his spot in Quraysh. Not because he wanted his spot in Quraysh, but so that he could protect the prophets and make sure no harm came to the prophets. And the Quraysh constantly tried to persuade Abu Talib to leave the Prophet. They tried to give him money. They tried to give him gold. They tried to give him riches. They said, leave your nephew. He's a crazy man. He doesn't know what he's talking about. Leave him. But what did Abu Talib say? In one of his most famous poems, he said, وَاللَّهِ لَنْ يَصِلُوا إِلَيْكَ بِجَمْعِهِمْ حَتَّى أُوَسِّدَ فِي التُّرَابِ دَفِنًا. O prophets, by Allah, they will never reach you with all of their forces until I am buried beneath the ground. They won't reach you, O prophets. I won't let them. I am standing by your side. Now I ask you, somebody who was a kafir, somebody who was a disbeliever, would they say this to the prophets? Would they say that, "O Prophet, they're not going to reach you and I will defend you even if I have to give my own life"? No, they wouldn't care. They would say, "My nephew is a crazy man. I don't even believe he's the Prophet. Why am I defending him? There's no reason to defend him." But this proclamation shows a sign of deep faith. It shows that he believed in the message of the Prophet, that he believed in what the Prophet was saying. Number 2, the boycott of Banu Hashim, a testament to Abu Talib alayhi salam's faith. Eventually, near the end of Abu Talib's life, what happened? Quraysh got sick of the Muslims. They're like, we don't want to deal with them anymore. And so they decided to boycott them. They expelled the Muslims to a place called Sha'ib Abu Talib, which was a small farm on the outskirts of Mecca. And this farm was desolate. It didn't have animals. It didn't have plants. It didn't have sustenance. What they were eating on that farm was what we now call rabbit food. Grass. Literally grass. Because nobody would sell them food. Nobody would bring them food. And there was no sustenance on that farm. Now I ask you, would a man who wasn't a Muslim live in those harsh conditions? No. He'd say, you know what, O Prophet, you're on your own now. They're boycotting you, but I'm not eating that food. I'm going and I'm living comfortably. I have money, I have friends. I'm an old man. Why would I subject myself to this torture? Only somebody who believed in the Prophet would go through with this. Furthermore, it is narrated that Abu Talib alayhi salam would make the Prophet sleep in a different place every single night in Sha'ib Abu Talib. And what would he do? He would replace the Prophet with one of his own sons. Just in case if Quraysh invaded, if they knew where the Prophet slept when they came to kill the Prophets, it wouldn't be the Prophet they killed. Now I ask you, would a father sacrifice one of his own sons for his nephew? Is that something that's logical? Does that make sense to you guys? That an uncle puts his nephew above his own son? It doesn't make sense, right? Logically, it doesn't make sense. And scientifically, it doesn't make sense. There's 3 theories that I want to give you guys today that prove that this isn't something that a father would do for his nephew. Number 1 is the parental investment theory. The parental investment theory says that a parent is always going to be more invested in his own offspring than the offspring of his siblings or other children. Why? Because they're the ones that carry his genetic DNA. When it comes to carrying the lineage, it's the children that are going to carry the lineage, right? The sons that are going to carry the lineage, right? Especially in Arab culture. When we say Imam Ali, who was Imam Ali? Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib, the son of Abi Talib. They didn't have last names. It was the son of the father. And so it was always the son who was going to carry the legacy of the father. So that's number 1. That it is simple human evolution. that a father will always support his sons over his nephews because they're the ones that carry his legacy. Number 2, you have neuroscientific evidence. Differences in the activation of the brain. When an fMRI scan was done, a functional MRI scan was done, it was seen that when a parent was shown a photo of their child, specifically their child, the parts of the brain that showed love, that showed compassion, that showed care, flashed. When they were shown photos of their nephews, of their nieces, of other children, they didn't flash as brightly. They might have flashed. But when it was their own children, it flashed brightly. Meaning that the brain itself recognizes that this is my child. I love my child. I care for my child. I have compassion for my child. But when it came to other children, it didn't do that. Right? And last but not least, you have this thing called oxytocin, the love hormone. We've all heard of it, right? Oxytocin is the hormone that is literally responsible for bonding and affection. It's the hormone that makes you feel bonding and affection. It's the hormone that makes you feel affection. And it is released in higher quantities when a parent interacts with their child, but isn't released in as high quantities when they react with other children. When they're interacting with other children, it's not really releasing. When they interact with their own children, it releases. And it's not a voluntary thing, it's involuntary. And so again, I ask you, would a disbeliever sacrifice his own sons for his nephew unless he believed his nephew was the prophet of God? Logically and scientifically, it doesn't make sense. Simply doesn't. Number 3, Abu Talib's poetry, which was a clear testament to his faith. Although Abu Talib may have had to hide his love for Islam, his poetry made it very clear. In the beginning, that first line of Arabic poetry that I recited to you was one of his most famous lines of poetry, speaking about how he'd protect the prophets. This is another one. أَلَمْ تَعْلَمُوا أَنَّا وَجَدْنَا مُحَمَّدًا نَبِيًّا كَمُوسَى خُطَّ فِي أَوَّلِ الْكُتُبِ. Do you not know, do you not recognize, O Quraysh, that we have found Muhammad a prophet, just as Musa was a prophet and he is mentioned in the ancient scriptures? I ask you, again, and this is all just basic logic, my brothers and sisters. When you think about this situation logically, it's something that's obvious for anybody to understand. So I ask you again, would a kafir come and compare the Prophet Muhammad to the Prophet Musa alayhi salam? Of course not, right? Would he affirm that the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salam is found in the ancient scriptures? Of course he wouldn't. This is only something that a true believer could say. These are only the words of a true believer. And again, this is just straight logic, right? To this point, we haven't needed any hadith to tell us this. We haven't needed the Quran to tell us this. When the proof is brought in front of you, you just think about it, it's obvious. Number 4, the Prophet's love and respect for Abu Talib alayhi salam. The Prophet had many uncles. Many uncles. One of them is known in the Quran. Abu Lahab. تبت يدا أبي لهب وتب ما أغنى عنه ماله وما كسب. Right? The Quran reprimands Abu Lahab. تبت يدا أبي لهب وتب. Saying that his wealth did not help him. His wealth did not help him in this life or in the next. When this ayah came down, did the Prophet say, oh no, my uncle Abu Lahab, I feel so bad for him. He's my uncle, he's my own flesh and blood. Why is the Quran saying this about him? No. When the Quran told him, cut off your uncle Abu Lahab, he cut off his uncle Abu Lahab. Why? Because when the Prophet is commanded something by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he acts upon it. He doesn't question. And so if Abu Talib was a kafir, would the Prophet have called the year that Abu Talib died Am al-Huzn, the year of sadness? No. He would have said he was a kafir just like Abu Lahab was a kafir. He wouldn't have cried for him. But he did cry for him. Why? Because he knew he was a Muslim. Because he knew who Abu Talib was. And when we look at the hadiths of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam, sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad, we see that Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salam, it is narrated that he says, قال الإمام جعفر الصادق عليه السلام إن مثل أبي طالب مثل أصحاب الكهف كتموا الإيمان وظهروا الشرك فآتاهم الله أجرهم مرتين. The example of Abu Talib is like the example of the people of the cave, the ones that the Quran mentions. The people of the cave did what? They lived under a tyrant who they knew would kill them if they exposed their faith. So they pretended to be polytheists, right? Because they knew they would do better living and worshipping Allah than dying. In the same way that Abu Talib alayhi salam knew that he would do better living and protecting the Prophet because he knew what would happen to the Prophet after his death. And what did happen to the Prophet after his death? They ran him out of Mecca. They ran him out of Mecca. He could no longer stay in Mecca. And how many wars began after the Prophet had to leave Mecca? So he hid his faith just like the people of the cave. And for that Allah will reward them twice. Because their job is much harder than it is to just worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Having to hide your faith and worship Allah in secret is much harder than just worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala outright. Right? And Imam Ali alayhi salam says in Nahj al-Balagha, قال الإمام علي عليه السلام والله ما عبد أبي أبو طالب صنما قط. By Allah, my father Abu Talib never once worshipped a sanam, an idol. Never once. Qat. Qat means full stop. Never. Done. وَلَقَدْ كَانَ يُوَحِّدُ اللَّهُ عَزَّ وَجَلَّ سِرًّا وَلَوْ كَانَ يُظْهِرُ ذَلِكَ لَقَتَلَهُ قُرَيْشٌ. And he was a muwahhid. He believed in one Lord. كَانَ يُوَحِّدُ اللَّهُ عَزَّ وَجَلَّ. He believed that there is one Lord and that is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if he were to reveal that to the people of Quraysh, they would have killed him. Right? This is our Imam telling us that Abu Talib was not a kafir. Abu Talib was a Muslim. Full stop. Now, we have to ask ourselves, if there is all of this proof that Abu Talib was a Muslim, why the accusations? Why are there still people that believe that he was a disbeliever? Because of Amir al-Mu'mineen. Exactly. He was the father of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. You see, there's this group of people that we have to introduce called the Umayyads. The Umayyads wanted power. They craved power. But there was an obstacle in their way. That obstacle was Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, Amir al-Mu'mineen. And so to lesson from Amir al-Mu'mineen, because they couldn't listen from Amir al-Mu'mineen, right? When you look at Amir al-Mu'mineen, what are you going to say about him to make him look bad? Can you say anything about him to make him look bad? No. And so they start attacking the people around him. They start making up lies about him. They start making up lies about his father. They start making up lies about his sons. Numerous lies about Imam Hussein and Imam al-Hassan. So that what? They can lesson from Imam Ali. So it begins with the Umayyads. It is said that during the Khilafah of Uthman, Abu Sufyan gathered all of the Umayyads in his house. Abu Sufyan at this point was probably 80, 85 years old. He was a very old man. He gathered all the Umayyads in his house. And what did he tell them? Ya Bani Umayya, talaqafuha talaqqaf al-kura. O Bani Umayya, take it like you would take a ball. Play with it like you would play with a ball. What is it in this scenario? The Khilafah. Play with the Khilafah like you would play with a ball, like children when they pass a ball around. Pass it around like that, between you. فَوَالَّذِي يَحْلُفُ بِهِ أَبُو سُفْيَانَ, by the one that Abu Sufyan swears by. Meaning not Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but what? The idols. He's telling you here, I'm not a Muslim. I am a kafir. فَوَالَّذِي يَحْلُفُ بِهِ أَبَا سُفْيَانَ. You could have said, فَوَاللَّهِ. No. He's trying to tell you, it's not God. I'm not swearing by God. I'm swearing by the idols. فَوَالَّذِي يَحْلُفُ بِهِ أَبُو سُفْيَانَ مَا زِلْتُ أَرْجُوهَا لَكُمْ وَلَتَصِيرَنَّ إِلَى صِبْيَانِكُمْ وَرَثًا. By the one that Abu Sufyan swears by the idols. I want this to become a waratha. I want this to become something that you give your children. That was the hope of the Umayyads. Once it fell into the hands of Uthman, they wanted it to go to the next Umayyad. And after him, the next Umayyad. And after him, the next Umayyad. And continue and continue and continue. Because they saw their opportunity for power. The prophets, when he became the prophet of God, took their power away. They were the leaders of Quraysh. The light was on them. They were enjoying the money, they were enjoying the power, they were enjoying the fame. But then the prophets came, and in a matter of years, took that spotlight away from them. He took Mecca back from them. And so they wanted to take it back. They missed that power. They missed that fame. And they wanted it back. And when we look at who began this, when we look at Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan, and the kind of person that Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan was, without these lies, would anybody have accepted Muawiyah as a Khalifa? Comparing him to Amir al-Mu'mineen, comparing him to Imam Hassan, comparing him to Imam Hussein, is it an equal comparison? Can you say either one deserved it? No. The comparison is like comparing like this. Even worse. It doesn't work. It doesn't make sense. Just to look at a couple of things that Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan did during his Khilafah. And these are all from sources outside of the school of Ahlul Bayt. Every single one of these sources is from outside of the school of Ahlul Bayt. Number one is fabricating hadith against Imam Ali alayhi salam, first and foremost. The source is Ibn Abi Shaybah al-Musannif, volume 11, page 93. كتب معاوية إلى عماله أن برئت الذمة ممن روى حديثا فيه فضلا لأبي تراب وأهل بيته. Muawiyah sent a letter to every single one of his cronies, to every single one of the people that worked for him. And he said, I disavow you, I fire you, you're out of my service if you say even one hadith that has the fadl, that has the praise of Abu Talib. Who's Abu Talib here? Amir al-Mu'mineen, Imam Ali. If you say even one hadith that has the fadl of Abu Talib or his family. That's how insecure he was. That he knew if even one hadith was narrated from the fadl, from the praise of Amir al-Mu'mineen, people would realize they're following the wrong person. That's how afraid he was. That's how weak his khilafah was. Number 2 is the cursing of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam on the pulpits. Sahih Muslim, volume 4, page 1874, hadith 2404. قال سعد بن أبي وقاص أمر معاوية سعدا بسب علي فأبى فقال ما منعك أن تسب أبي تراب. Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas says Muawiyah sent a letter to Sa'd. He told him, curse Imam Ali on the mimbar, on the pulpit. He denied. And so Muawiyah asks, what is it that's stopping you from cursing Abu Talib? Again, his khilafah was weak. He could not maintain the khilafah without bringing down Amir al-Mu'mineen. Because as long as people knew who Amir al-Mu'mineen was, there would always be doubt about Muawiyah. And I have a couple more, but I'll take only a few of them because we are running out of time a little bit. This is from Sahih al-Bukhari, volume 1, hadith 2812, also in Sahih Muslim, volume 4, hadith 2916. This was a hadith that my father mentioned on the first night, I believe it was, of Ramadan, when he was talking about building the masjid, building the first masjid that was built in Islam. For those of you that weren't here, I'll give a small recap. The story goes that they were building a masjid. All the Sahaba were building a masjid, the first masjid in Islam. And so they were carrying rocks, these big rocks. And to joke with, قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم تقتل عمار الفئة الباغية. الفئة الباغية, the rebellious group, the oppressive group, the evil group. Now I ask you, oh brothers and sisters, who can tell me who killed Ammar bin Yasir? Muawiyah in the Battle of Siffin. Ammar bin Yasir died at the hands of the forces of Muawiyah in the Battle of Siffin. Do you need more proof than that? The Prophet tells you, Al-Fi'at al-Baghiyah, the oppressive force, the rebellious force is going to kill Ammar bin Yasir. And by the way, when we look to the fiqh of the other side, they have a very interesting statement when it comes to the person who comes out against the Khalifa, to the person who fights the Khalifa. What do they say? They say the person who dares fight the Khalifa is a kafir and deserves to be killed. Now Muawiyah in the Battle of Siffin, who was he fighting? Was he not fighting the Khalifa? Enough said. Don't need to say more than that. These were the type of people who were creating lies about Abu Talib alayhi salam. They took one of the best people, one of the cleanest people, one of the foremost protectors of Islam, and tried to drag him down. Why? For their own personal gain, for their own pleasure, for their own power. And so next time, if anybody tries to argue with you and tell you, no, Abu Talib wasn't a Muslim, Talib was a kafir, tell them points A, B, C, D, E, F, G. How much more proof do you want? It's in front of you. Open your eyes and read. It's in front of you. So in conclusion, let us always remember Abu Talib bil khayr, in happiness, knowing that he was one of the most foremost protectors of Islam. And let us always fact check people's opinions. A lot of people have some crazy opinions nowadays. Do your own research. Come to your own conclusions. Make sure you're not just listening to what you're being told, but you know truth from falsehood. اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات الأحياء منهم والأموات تابع اللهم بيننا وبينهم بالخيرات إنك مجيب الدعوات إنك غافر الخطيئات إنك ماحي السيئات
وجعلها حسنات إنك على كل شيء قدير برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. وصلى الله وسلم